do it. All right. Oh, Wise Rat.
I can open in prayer.
Oh, if you would like to, I would love that. Thank you, sir.
Dear God, thank you so much for this opportunity that we get to be here. Thank you that Scribe made it safely and that everything's okay. And I pray that the rest of everyone's week goes smoothly. I ask that you will help us to be receptive to your word tonight. Help us to eliminate all distractions, and that we can just focus on you and really worship you during this time by studying and learning more about you and about your Son. And thank you for Scribe and his willingness to teach. In your name I pray, amen.
So I'm going to apologize real quick. I had a breakthrough this week, and I fixed my coffee pot. So now I have tea again. I haven't had it in a good long while, and I realize I haven't filled up my glass. So if you guys will give me about 20 seconds, I'm going to get some tea.
Give me 10 to look up the fish sticks command.
Oh, thank you.
I
Fine.
don't know it either.
I'll be right back.
Did we just begin?
Yep.
Yeah, he's... Sorry, go ahead.
Winged is grabbing a drink real quick. We haven't started yet.
Sweet.
Yeah, we
I
just
looked
did
at
the
the
opening
time. I just looked at the time and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Oh, God bless you.
What kind are you drinking?
Oh, the
Don't
the
worry,
elite-
Divine. We're generally not a punctual group.
That is true.
I'm gonna
Just
get
wait
my
till the end.
notepad. I'm gonna get ready.
Wait till the end. You'll see how unpunctual I am. It's great. All right. So last time we were here 2 weeks ago. What did we talk about? If anybody remembers. Not Wise Rat. He's not allowed to answer. Or Mrs. Wise Rat, technically also disqualified. We covered the Transfiguration a few weeks ago. The demon-possessed boy was last week. Yep, or not last week, 2 weeks ago. Last study.
The big thing we focused on, if I'm remembering right, was the Jesus basically confirming that he was about to fulfill the prophecy, wasn't it? He was kind of speaking between the lines of saying, I'm about to go die. I forget the details, but
That's been brought up a number of times throughout chapter 9, and we're gonna cover that a bit more in depth tonight. So, like we said, through chapter 9, long chapter. We've been in it for the last 2 studies were in chapter 9, and this one again is going to be in it. Like, we can't get away from it, but we'll blame that on Luke for not dividing his Bible up, even though it wasn't his doing that made the chapters. Whatever. All right. Great. Awesome. Okay. That happened last week. And then we also had the casting out of the demon from the young boy. I'm trying to get back to my place in my Bible. We had a little bit of discourse with the disciples, kind of this whole childish thinking about who was the greatest, and Jesus kind of setting his disciples a certain way, trying to teach them because he knows where he's going, and we're going to talk about that tonight. But he's trying to kind of give these lessons to the disciples, knowing that his time is getting short. So, with that in mind, dear notes, please don't do that. What? My notes are what? Okay, for some reason, the page that my notes are on is like frozen, so I'm going to have to open it up again. So I apologize, guys. I'm already late, and then the computer decides it wants to crash. It's just, if you guys know the whole thing with me and Murphy, then it's hard and effect tonight. Oh, and that's why my computer's installing updates. Can we not? I
Microsoft
swear.
timing.
Yeah, it's astounding. Like, turn off the auto updates just for now, all right? Just go away. No, don't restart now. That's going to look real suspicious. Chaos. All right. Okay, I think things are functioning again. We're going to see how this goes. So, we're starting off tonight, Luke chapter 9, verse 51. Now, this is an interesting section of the Bible that we're entering. For those that are a little bit in the know, the Gospels are kind of generally divided into two groups. I say groups, it's really not fair. 3 of them, and then the other one. The first 3 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are known as the Synoptic Gospels. Primarily because a lot of the stuff that is discussed in them are shared between the other 2. There's a lot of similar material between Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John's kind of the outlier. He covers a lot of different things that the others kind of either miss or only cover lightly. That being said, this next chunk of Luke is going to be a little unique in that this is only covered in his gospel. So starting from verse 51 until a little bit into chapter 18, this is exclusively Luke. He's the only one that writes about this. Now, there's some things in the other gospels that are similar, but these events are only covered in this gospel. So I know in previous times we've been able to switch over to other gospels and be like, oh, let's get some explanation on this. But these next few chapters, we're not going to really be able to do a direct one-to-one comparison. But because there are similarities, it's not like we throw the baby out with the bathwater. The Bible's still the greatest commentary on itself. It's just not the exact event. Okay? All right. So, with that being said, I'm going to attempt to butcher the Bible command so we can get somebody to read it. Did anyone do research on this before I make this look terrible?
It's got like extra dashes now.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure it out.
I did.
All right, please don't kill me, fish sticks. Oh my gosh, I got it.
You got it perfectly.
All right. I'm really hoping those are the verses. Okay, yes, those are. All right. Sorry. I'm kind of I'm a loose cannon tonight, guys. Somebody read these 6 verses for us, please.
Oh, let me do a lag test.
You
You
sound
good?
good.
Okay. When the days drew near for him to be taken up, he set his face to go to Jerusalem. And he sent messengers ahead of him, who went and entered a village of the Samaritans to make preparations for him. But the people did not receive him, because his face was set toward Jerusalem. And when his disciples James and John saw it, they said, Lord, do you want us to tell fire to come down from heaven and consume them? But he turned and rebuked them, and they went on to another village.
Okay. Thank you. So, in verse 51, we get the theme of this passage through the end of chapter 9. And it's in Jesus setting his face to go to Jerusalem. Now, it doesn't, just outside of any kind of context, of course, Jesus lives in Palestine, and Jerusalem's kind of the center of worship. Why is that a big deal? Well, we know that this is his going up to Jerusalem to die. This is him preparing to go to the cross. And so when it says that he is setting his face, what does that mean? So the Greek word here is the Greek word sterizo. And I'll put that in the chat. There we go. Sterizo. It's a word that literally it means to strengthen, but the idea is of a supporting beam. So uh, if you're, I know we have some gardeners in the chat. So if you have a like if you're growing a tomato plant, when they start growing fruit become notoriously heavy. And so it kind of weighs them down. They can lean and they can sit and fall over a bit. What you'll often do is you will put a stake in the ground to help, and you can kind of string up this tomato plant to cause it to stand up straight, keep the plants or keep the actual tomatoes growing from sitting on the ground where smaller animals can get to them. That's kind of the idea of what you get from Sterizo. It's literally a support beam. It's set to. Why did Fish Sticks drop that verse there?
That was me.
Darn it, Kess! She's reading my notes again. Okay. Got it, T. All right. Okay.
No.
She did. That's literally. Oh, I'm gonna have to send you like a screenshot of my notes. That's literally point C under point number 2 in my outline. It's amazing. Okay. At any rate, Sterizo literally means a support beam. It means to make it so that it won't move, that it's steadfast, it's firm. The idea here is that when Jesus set his face towards Jerusalem, he is focused. He is aligning himself completely. That is his purpose, and he's going to do it, and he's not going to be distracted. He's not going to let anything move him aside from that goal. And that's going to set the entirety of our kind of set the theme for this passage here. Now, just when you think about setting yourself or setting yourself steadfastly to a task, I think about being at work. They'll say, "Hey, do you want to, do such and such a job, or you need to do this." Like if I'm in receiving, you need to get through all these boxes, or if I'm zoning a section, we need you to finish this by such and such a time. I can steadfastly set myself to that, but it's not really hard. It's just part of my job. Think about what Jesus is setting himself towards. This is the cross. And not just any death. This is an excruciating death that he is willingly taking on. It would take a tremendous amount of courage and determination to set yourself towards such an event and not find, anything to redirect you from it. There are times where I'm doing something and it's like I can find anything to distract me or move me aside from what I'm supposed to be doing. Jesus is going to his death and he sets his face toward it like a flint. And like Kes put here, Isaiah 57, that is prophetic fulfillment.
That's something I've actually been kind of meditating on in my own personal Bible study, and I'm curious about your comment on it here.
In what way? Go ahead.
Jesus he knows he's about to die. He knows he is about to die in quite possibly the most horrific way possible for this day and age. It is very well established, though, that while yes, he is perfect and he is God incarnate in the flesh, he is a man. Is there not, like, he is at peace? He knows the Father is there to guide him. He knows that should he will it, he can call down the angels' army and wipe the slate clean. But is there anything one way or the other? I really can't find scriptural evidence one way or the other. Is there fear here?
I'd say not fear, because God is love, and we know that perfect love casts out fear.
Fear's not the right word, but apprehensiveness.
Apprehension? I would say that... Oh, it's difficult to find the right word. And this is something that might be better suited for the after study, or the after hours. But I will say that we know that Jesus... that I think apprehension is definitely something that you could make the claim for, because we know in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus prayed, if it's possible, take this cup from me. Jesus didn't want to have to go through everything that he was about to. Now, you could make kind of make the idea of, what all did that entail? Was it particularly just the taking of the sin? Was it all of the physical punishment he was going to take? Was it a combination of everything? You could make a strong statement for any of those. But we ultimately know that his apprehension was not his final. It didn't control his judgment, because he follows that up with, "Nevertheless, not my will, but yours."
Exactly, and that's exactly what I've kind of been in my own studies. The point getting across is that despite this very human emotion that were the world to end tomorrow, of just what may come will come, Lord's will be done, but through all of that, of just that peace of mind in the background, this dichotomy of apprehension, and for us being far less than Jesus, a fearfulness, but at the end of the day, that peace.
I think there's a lot that you could say. John 17, I think, the high priestly prayer, goes a lot in that he's praying for people to come, praying for his followers and their peace, knowing what he's going to do. He's just expressing, physically, I don't want, or in whatever regard, I don't want to go through this, but I know that I have to. Anyways, I don't want to get too sidetracked. Good question. We can come back and revisit that in the after hours if you guys are still interested in that topic. Okay. So Jesus is like, I have to go to Jerusalem. This is my goal, is my objective. This is my one thing that every action I take is going to be leading me to that. Now, in the coming weeks, we're going to see multiple times, like even tonight, opportunities where Jesus could have turned aside. People that persuading him or talking to him, or just even events that come up that could have presented him the chance to turn aside from his mission, but he remained focused on the goal. Excellent point, Kes. Excellent. Hey guys, we made it through one verse. Yay. Man, this
My
is a
bad.
big crowd tonight. No, you're perfectly fine. We all know my routine. All right. So Jesus, knowing that he has to go to Jerusalem, says, hey, I have to head from a particular direction. Right now, I'm in the north of Palestine, and I have to get to Jerusalem, which is in the south. So he sends some messengers ahead to a nearby village to see if to make preparations for him to reside there, just kind of hang out there while he's on his way to the south to Jerusalem. Now, at first glance, this doesn't seem unreasonable. Jesus is traveling from Galilee to Jerusalem, but geography wasn't really the major factor in play here, because the town Jesus sent his messengers to was in Samaria, and yeah, that carries some weight. So, for those that don't know, most of you probably do, but Samaritans and Jews didn't really get along too well, which is why we don't have the parable of the Samaritan. We have the parable of the Good Samaritan. And there are a number of reasons for this. Historically, the Samaritan of Israelite refugees and a mix of other deported people from the Assyrian Empire after the fall of the northern kingdom of Israel in 722 BC. The Jews, the people of Judah, who were taken to Babylon and then returned, looked at the Samaritans as half-breeds. They weren't really full Israelite because they had mixed with these other nations. The Samaritans had established their own form and place of worship outside of Jerusalem. Because they were a mix with these other people groups, their worship wasn't what was considered tainted. That's actually my next point. They worshipped in Samaria, not in Jerusalem. They actually held it against the Jews about their place of worship. And if you remember back, I guess it was a year, maybe more ago, when we were going through Ezra and Nehemiah, it was the Samaritans who were the guys that opposed the building of the temple and the walls around Jerusalem in the first place. And if you were here for that, you know how well that went, which was not great. So, yeah. The hostility between the Jews and the Samaritans was so intense that when Jews had to travel from the north to the south or vice versa, they would actually take the long way around. They would, because Samaria was in the middle of Palestine. If you had to go from the north, they would actually go around to the eastern side of the Jordan River and then come back in down around the Dead Sea just to get in so they didn't have to step foot in Samaria. So you can tell amicable relations. So, bearing all of that in mind, why on earth did Jesus decide to try and stay in a village in Samaria? Open mic time. Any thoughts?
Plant seeds.
Okay.
Because Jesus didn't care about their cultural hangups.
Interesting.
Agreed.
Have answer, but will derail.
No. I gave you open mic permission.
So you can actually go back and reference the Samaritan woman and what Beast, I think it was, there just said about Jesus doesn't hang up on their cultural differences. I forget what the actual Greek words were, but there were two words basically that the Jews used to describe the Samaritans. One was basically a slur that described them as this mangy dog.
Yep.
But the other is basically what you would describe a house pet. And Jesus describes them as the house pet. So this is him kind of establishing that the kingdom is spreading. It's not just holed up in Jerusalem anymore. This is, even in his final hours, he is spreading the gospel elsewhere.
Okay. All good answers. All good answers. Let's keep reading and see if we can get a little.
If I
See if
may,
we can
one
find
more
one more thing.
suggestion.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
He wants the disciples to get rid of their cultural hangups about what they think of the Samaritans.
Let's keep reading. So we come down and we see that this village rejects Jesus, doesn't let him in, doesn't want him to show up, and so James and John, they have a little response to this. And you know what? My first thought when I read this is, "Hey, it's not Peter." So some sources that I read seem to think that James and John were actually the guys that Jesus sent as the messengers, because they had the strongest reaction here. I'm not here to analyze that. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. I don't think it's necessarily powerfully relevant. What I do know is that they certainly earned their nicknames of the Sons of Thunder with this one. Boy, they let loose. Now, there's a lot in play here, and it's pretty easy to miss it if you just kind of skim over it here. So we need to go back in history a little bit. Now, when I think, or when it's mentioned the calling of fire from heaven, what do we think of? What's the first thing that comes to mind?
Moses.
Sodom and Gomorrah.
Moses, Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay. Anything else? Baal. What do you mean by Baal, Pastor Divine?
The prophets are the worshippers of Baal
Okay.
and Elijah. Yeah.
I think he means
Yeah.
the altars on the mountain, and
Yeah.
they couldn't call fire down. Yeah.
That's the first one that comes to mind for me. Others are absolutely right, but when I think of the classic example of calling fire from heaven, it's Elijah versus the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, where they're like cutting themselves and crying out and doing all sorts of stuff to try to get Baal to come down, and Elijah's making fun of them over just like, dudes, what are you doing? So that's the first example, but there's actually another one that Kessa is again had been looking at my notes at to get the answer for. I swear. I don't know how she does it. So, a little bit later, because that happens in the book of First Kings, chapter 18. In the first chapter of Second Kings, there's this king named Ahaziah. And Ahaziah has a little mishap in his palace, and he gets hurt. Bible says he falls ill, but he's not doing well. And so he gathers a bunch of guys together, some of his messengers, and says, "Hey, I want you to go to the prophets of Baal and consult with them to see if I'm going to live or die from what I'm dealing with." And so they go out. As they're going out, Elijah is hanging out, and he intercepts them. He says, "Hey, I got a word from God. I just want to tell you that you guys are going to see Baal. I just like there's a God in Israel, and I'm his prophet, and I'm here to tell you that yeah, the king's going to die. So go back and tell him." So they go back to tell the king, and the king's like, "Who the heck was this guy that sent you back here?" And they kind of described him. And he's like, "Oh gosh, that was Elijah." So he said, "Go get him." So he sends out a captain of 50 troops. And so this captain of 50 guys, so all of them go out to this hill where Elijah's hanging out. And they say, "Hey, come with us." And Elijah says, or they say, "Man of God." Well, I really should read the passage. But the idea is they say, "Hey, you prophet, come with us." And he says, "If I really am a prophet, then may fire fall from heaven and consume all of you." And instantly it just falls, burns them up. And so the king sends out a second group, the captain with his 50 guys, and they come out, and Elijah says the same thing. Boom, burns them up. Third captain comes out with his 50. When he gets to the hill, he like drops on all fours and is like bowing and like shaking. He's like, "Please no, please no, please no, just please come." And it's really an amazing story, and it's actually kind of humorous, like if you tell it like that. But that is kind of the idea of what's being referenced here in this passage. Um, so Elijah is using this calling of fire from heaven to demonstrate to King Ahaziah that, look, you can go consult with the prophets of Baal, but there's only one true God, Israel. I am his prophet, and here is validation of that. Boom, fire from heaven. Thank you, Cass. So we see that Elijah is calling fire from heaven again, but it really starts to get interesting. Do you know where the capital of the kingdom of Israel at the time was? Wouldn't you guessed it? It was in a place called Samaria. Mm. So Elijah's calling fire from heaven to consume people in Samaria. And here James and John saying, "Hey, Lord, you want us to call fire from heaven and consume this town here in Samaria?" I don't think that's a coincidence. While this event happened 900 years prior to these events here in Luke, James and John apparently knew the story. And let's not forget that in this very chapter in Luke, James and John had even seen Elijah back on the Mount of Transfiguration. Apparently, the two of them, being brothers, had a revelatory moment of inspiration. And in combination with wanting to make up for their failure to cast out that young boy's demon that we talked about last week, they decided to offer to consume this village for their rejection of Jesus because they wanted to mirror Elijah from nearly a millennium earlier. Gosh, doesn't that sound impressive? Surely Jesus will take note. Does this also not ring a little bit as a callback to the idea of who's the greatest? I don't know about you, but I don't think James and John got it yet. So how does Jesus respond to this offer? What's he say? And I'm going to use the the Scribe Standard Version to read this. And Jesus looked back and said, "Guys, shut up. Seriously." Jesus did not he what he says here is really interesting, but he basically told them that like you don't even know what the heck you're saying. You think you're trying to be all this impressive. Oh, look at us calling fire like Elijah. You're out of your depth. It says you don't know what kind of spirit you are of, for the Son of Man did not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. Now, this phraseology that Jesus uses here it's pretty emphatic, and it insinuates some rather interesting truths. First he tells them that they don't know what kind of spirit they're of. Um, Essentially, he's like, "You guys think you're going to impress me with that? You couldn't be more wrong." Because then he comes out and he straight up tells them that what his purpose was. That wasn't to destroy, which, by the way, is what James and John were trying to do, but to save the lives of men. Question: if their spirit wasn't of Jesus, if it wasn't aligned with Jesus, then who was it aligned with? Just imagine how James and John probably felt in this moment. They had tried to be bold and make a statement, just being like, wow, we're going to be awesome. We're going to show up all the disciples, and Jesus is going to think, wow, these guys really, now they understand it. Only for Jesus to tell them that their heads were screwed on wrong. They had failed with the demon-possessed boy. They had failed to understand what true greatness was in the eyes of Jesus. They had failed to align their purposes with that of Jesus, and not to mention there was probably also like a 0% chance that they would have been able to call fire from heaven in the first place. So why? Why did Jesus try to settle or try to reside in a Samaritan town? Jesus wanted to save men. He straight up told us that. We see his purpose here, but also because Jesus needed to demonstrate to his disciples how to align themselves. He needed them to see what his purpose was. His disciples still needed to learn the lessons of mercy and humility. Meekness was a hallmark of Jesus' ministry. But his disciples hadn't learned that lesson yet. All right. That's the first half of the passage. Yeah, definitely a teaching moment. And Jesus was the master teacher. And ultimately, we see that they didn't have to call fire from heaven. There was no repercussions for this village that's mentioned here. They just went to a different one. Yeah. And it was, and was it Ford? I think that mentioned the whole thing with the Samaritan woman. It wasn't like Jesus was unheard of in Samaria. He had definitely been there before and had definitely made some noise. So it's not unreasonable to think that Jesus could have found some place to hang out in Samaria, but this village rejected him when they found out that he was going to Jerusalem. That's what set them off. All right. Any other questions or thoughts or whatever? Yay, I did it twice. Okay. Well, let's get someone to close out the chapter. Can someone read verses 57 through 62?
I can.
Yay, thank you, Wise Rat.
The cost of following Jesus. As they were going along the road, someone said to him, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. To another he said, Follow me. But he said, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. And Jesus said to him, Leave the dead to bury their own dead. But as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God. Yet another said, I will follow you, Lord, but let me first say farewell to those at my home. And Jesus said to him, No one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God.
Thank you. All right. So now Jesus is back walking. He's heading towards Jerusalem again, and as he and the disciples are traveling, they apparently draw a bit of a crowd. And to be fair, that's not exactly unusual with Jesus. Uh, but some members of these crowd have some things to say. So let's kind of take them one by one. We'll just see what's said. So we have this one guy, one gentleman. He'll come up and say, "I'll follow you wherever you go." And that sounds really nice, doesn't it? I'm sure that Jesus told him to come right along, didn't he? Yeah, nah, not exactly. Now, before we go any further, it's important to note that Jesus doesn't dissuade this man from following. He doesn't say, no, you can't. He doesn't say that. But what he does do is he does give this man a much needed reality check. Because let's not kid ourselves. Jesus was famous. He was kind of a celebrity. I mean, everywhere he went, he drew a crowd. He couldn't get away from people. He was kind of like a first century rock star of a sort. Wherever he went, people followed. And in honesty, his disciples probably had a fair bit of that fame as well. I mean, a miracle working rabbi like Jesus certainly drew a crowd. And, this guy might have looked at that and thought that it might be really neat to get in with the quote, Jesus crowd. Maybe he thought that he could learn how to do miracles like Jesus. Maybe that was possible. Or maybe he could just get kind of in close with Jesus's disciples and get some of that fame and notoriety. Let's be perfectly fair. If we're going to go that route, we could go to the other end of the spectrum. Maybe this guy earnestly wanted to follow Jesus as a disciple. We don't know. We just know that he says, I will follow you wherever you go. Whatever his motivations were, Jesus made sure that he didn't get the wrong idea. A life spent following Jesus was not a glamorous one. It was a life of sacrifice. Yeah, very much, Josh. So the second guy, now the second person, Jesus starts the conversation with this individual. So he looks over to him and he says something very familiar. He looks at them and says, "Follow me." We've heard that a few times. And so this person responds and says, "Listen, at least let me go and bury my father first." Now, at first read, that seems like a perfectly reasonable request, right? Let me go bury my father. I don't think of that taking very long. But apparently Jesus thinks that it's going to take it seems to think it's going to take a little while with his response. He says, "Let the dead bury their own dead." As for you, go and proclaim everywhere the kingdom of God. Really? We don't even have enough time to bury this person's father? Really? Really, Jesus? That's what you're saying? That seems a little harsh, doesn't it? What do you guys think? Well, Drax says he heard he wanted to collect his father's inheritance. Okay. Certainly a. Ooh, Farmer Gal. Maybe his father was still alive even. Good pickup. You'll note that this person's response does not say that his father was dead. It just says, I want to bury my father. So I think a very big question should be, when do you, it's like, are there plans for doing that yet? Is he embalmed? Do you have a tomb picked out? Yeah. Yeah, there you go, Cass. You guys have got it. I mean, now let's be fair. This person's desire to bury their father wasn't necessarily a bad one. I mean, come on. Family obligations. There was nothing inherently wrong with this desire. But the spiritual needs of the world outweighed the temporal issues of this person's life. And again, real interesting part, nowhere does it say this person's father was actually dead. It just says that they wanted to bury him. The reality of the whole situation culturally was likely that they wanted to be able to live in their father's house and take care of him until he died, at which point they would be free to follow Jesus. This wasn't a hey, Jesus, just give me like a day for the funeral request. This was probably more than likely a hey, I've got some obligations that are going to keep me tied up for the next few years, Lord, but once those clear up, I'm all yours kind of request.
I've heard, so what people have discussed here so far, I've also heard that too. But the thing that has always confused me in this section is not so much the application, but Jesus' response. Like, why would he say, let the dead bury their own dead?
Ah. What do you guys think about that?
It's a reference to the unsaved.
Yes, it is. Good. Well done. Yep.
Oh, and Kess typed it at the exact same second.
Yeah, you guys nailed it. Perfect.
High five.
You guys absolutely did great. Let the spiritually dead bury their own dead. Called to bring life. That's what preaching the kingdom is. The kingdom can't wait. Time is of the essence. Jesus says, follow me, and that is an urgent summons. And you guys knocked that one out of the park. Good job. All right. Let's move on to our third crowd member. So this third person says that they'll follow Jesus once he's able to say goodbye to his friends and family. What do we think? Jesus going to see this one as a reasonable request this time around? Yeah, more or less, Kess. That's what's going on here. Yeah, of course Jesus wouldn't think this is reasonable. He's already 2 for 2 on knocking the other guys down a peg. Why not go for the trifecta? Now, admittedly, unlike the last one, this person's request was probably for only a very short period of time. But the problem was with the caveat. I just want to say goodbye to my past life, Lord. How many people have wanted to leave the past behind, but once they go to say goodbye, they find that they can't leave it behind, and they abandon the new life they had promised to move towards? That's Jesus' warning. farmers needed to plow fields in straight lines, like in rows. That was the most efficient way to plow and till the ground. It required their full attention. Otherwise, the oxen or whatever beasts of burden were pulling the plow would likely become misaligned and the rows would become crooked. It's like trying to, if you want a modern day example, it's like trying to drive on a straight road while constantly having your head look cocked back, looking in your blind spot. I mean, yeah, it's your blind spot's important, but if you're constantly looking behind yourself, I don't care how good you are, eventually you're going to go off course. Not exactly what I had in mind, but okay. Of course, being distracted and being pulled away from your purpose that you're called to is the perfect bookend to this passage. Because how did we start? With Jesus setting his face like a flint toward Jerusalem. This was a warning not to become distracted. Let's take our example from Jesus, who set his face to his task, determining to never waver or become distracted from his purpose. There we go, guys. That is actually all my notes. That's everything I've got written down. What do you guys think? What insights do you have? Any thoughts, comments, or
One quick comment on all three people that he rebuked here, if you can call it that.
okay?
My impression on this, especially given its location scripturally being so quickly mentioned after the raising of the dead girl, of Jesus knew the minds of these people, even as
Oh, yeah.
they're asking these, "Hey, let me come follow you." He knew their hearts.
Which is probably why he responded the way he did.
Yes, exactly. So is this not just every word Jesus said is very, very specifically chosen, and it carried weight.
Yes.
So is this not just another teaching moment that he's using these people to, not just the disciples, but those around him? Because again, where he is, this is an outreach area, if you will.
Yeah, of course. Very much so. And let's be real. These lessons are going to become we're going to be vital because Jesus is passing on these lessons and saying, set your purpose. Don't become distracted. Don't be drawn away by all sorts of things because a very major distraction is coming. But Jesus doesn't give them permission to abandon the purpose just because he dies. I mean, his command is follow me. And then he says, go and preach the kingdom. And he doesn't say when to stop. He just says, go and do it. And so he's trying to pass on these lessons to the disciples and to anyone that would hear. And admittedly, I think the disciples certainly were not prepared for how intense that trial was going to be, how powerful those distractions and that fear that set in was going to be. But following that, they understood the power that Jesus had over the circumstances, which allowed them to have that mind, as Paul writes, that was in Christ Jesus. Great point. What else, guys? Any other thoughts?
This is Josh. I wonder. I wonder too, and I know I'm reading a little bit into this, so it's dangerous. But I wonder how much of this is like when you've made a very difficult decision yourself, and people are saying things that might pull you away from that decision, how you might respond in a different way when you are committed to a decision that you've made. I wonder how much of this is revealing Jesus's own commitment to this mission and how invested he is in his decision, that any hesitation from other people is met with almost like him getting rid of his own doubts. You know, we know Jesus even struggled in the Garden of Gethsemane and had his doubts there. So it's like that reaction towards any sort of wait, let's delay, let's not do this yet, let's wait and take our time.
Hmm.
He's almost responding against that, maybe
Yeah.
even his own doubts. Yeah.
That's then message. Jesus' purpose. He every ounce of every fiber of his being, his whole being was given to going to Jerusalem to fulfill his purpose there. Now, I don't know that I would say I would use the term doubts. That seems strong.
I agree. Yeah.
But I think the Bible, Luke makes it rather interestingly clear that Jesus sets his face towards Jerusalem. I think he says it that way because the disciples noticed that they saw that there was some sort of driving force, some purpose that he had to get to Jerusalem. And so whenever throughout through this the last bit of chapter 9 as we saw here tonight, whenever the opportunity to not go to Jerusalem presented itself, whether in people saying, I want to go bury my father, or I want to go say goodbye to my friends, or what have you. Jesus is like, no. Time is of the essence. Set your mind, set your will, your determination, your focus on the tasks that I give you, where it is to follow me, to go and preach the kingdom. Whatever it is I give you, that's what you're supposed to do. And it was an object lesson again for those that were around. We saw, Jesus very clearly had an opportunity to turn aside to Jerusalem, or turn aside from Jerusalem. And the very first thing that happens, right after verse 51, verse 52 says he sent messengers to go into the village and they didn't receive them. Jesus could have said, oh, well, can't go that way. Guess I'm done. I guess Jerusalem will wait. No, they just went to another village. Jesus wasn't dissuaded. He used the opportunity to teach his disciples about mercy and meekness. Not every problem was solved by consuming fire from heaven. And then he continued on his way down to Jerusalem. D forward over here. Does the D stand for devil's advocate?
Tonight, possibly.
Any other thoughts, guys?